Marcus warned his boss that the furnace would explode. His boss threatened to fire him if he didn't shut up. 2 hours later, 3 men were fighting for their lives, and Marcus began planning his revenge.
Marcus Thompson had been working at Riverside Steelworks for 12 years when everything went sideways. The massive industrial complex sat like a sleeping giant along the Ohio River, its smokestacks reaching toward heaven like the fingers of some ancient god. For over a century, this mill had been the heartbeat of their small town, employing 3 generations of the same families, including Marcus's own grandfather and father. At 42, Marcus was one of the most experienced operators on the floor. He knew every machine, every safety protocol, every trick to keep production running smooth. The younger guys looked up to him, called him Steel because of his unshakable calm under pressure. He had a wife, Sarah, 2 teenage kids, and a mortgage on a modest house 3 blocks from where he grew up. Life wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, honest work. That all changed when corporate brought in Derek Hawthorne as the new plant manager. Derek was 35, fresh out of some fancy business school, with slicked back hair and suits that cost more than Marcus made in a month. He came in talking about optimization, lean manufacturing, and restructuring for efficiency. The workers nicknamed him the Shark within his first week. Derek's first move was to announce mandatory overtime cuts to save on labor costs, which meant everyone's paychecks got slashed by about 30%. Then he started targeting the older workers, claiming they were resistant to change and stuck in outdated methodologies. Marcus watched as men who'd given their entire adult lives to the mill got written up for minor infractions that had been overlooked for decades. The breaking point came on a humid Tuesday morning in July. Marcus was operating the primary furnace when he noticed irregular temperature readings. The gauges were showing fluctuations that could indicate a serious problem with the cooling system. In his 12 years, he'd seen what happened when furnaces overheated, explosions that could kill everyone within a 100-yard radius. Marcus immediately shut down his station and went to find Derek, who was in his air-conditioned office reviewing spreadsheets. "Mr. Hawthorne, we've got a potential safety issue with Furnace 3. The cooling system readings are all over the place. We need to shut it down and get maintenance to check it out." Derek barely looked up from his computer. "Thompson, I've told you people a dozen times. Production stops for nothing unless there's actual smoke or fire. Those old gauges are probably just acting up again. Get back to your station and keep the line moving." "Sir, with respect, I've been running these furnaces longer than you've been out of college. When the readings look like this, it means trouble. We're talking about people's lives here." Derek finally looked up, his cold blue eyes narrowing. "Thompson, are you refusing a direct order from your supervisor?" Marcus felt his jaw clench. "I'm trying to prevent a catastrophe." "What I'm hearing is insubordination. Get back to your station, restart that furnace, and keep your mouth shut about readings and catastrophes. You're not paid to think, you're paid to follow orders."
Marcus stood there for a long moment, weighing his options. He could file a safety complaint with OSHA, but that would take weeks to investigate, and Derek would make his life hell in the meantime. He could walk off the job, but he had a family to feed, and jobs were scarce in their town. Against every instinct screening in his head, Marcus trudged back to his station. 2 hours later, Furnace 3 exploded. The blast knocked Marcus backward into a support beam, cracking 2 ribs and giving him a concussion. Jim Rodriguez, a 23-year-old kid who'd just started working there to support his pregnant wife, caught a face full of molten metal. He spent 6 months in the burn unit and would never look the same again. Tommy Chen, a grandfather of 4, had his left arm mangled so badly they had to amputate below the elbow. The official investigation blamed equipment failure and unavoidable industrial accident. Derek made sure Marcus's safety concerns were never mentioned in any reports. When Marcus tried to speak up, Derek pulled him into his office with 2 HR representatives present. "Thompson, I understand you're upset about what happened to your colleagues. We all are. But I want to be very clear about something. If you start spreading rumors about supposed safety warnings that were ignored, you'll be terminated for creating a hostile work environment and spreading false information that could damage company morale and reputation. Do I make myself clear?" Marcus stared at a man across the desk, this corporate parasite who cared more about his quarterly bonuses than the lives of the men under his command. "Crystal clear, sir." But Derek wasn't done with Marcus. Over the next year, he made Marcus's life a living nightmare. Every shift assignment went to the most dangerous, miserable stations. Every small mistake got documented. Every suggestion Marcus made got shot down publicly to humiliate him in front of his coworkers. Derek even started scheduling Marcus for shifts that conflicted with his kids' school events, knowing Marcus would never complain because he needed the job. The worst part was watching Derek get promoted. 6 months after the explosion, the corporation rewarded his cost-cutting measures by making him regional manager. He started showing up to work in a brand-new BMW, bragging about his corner office at corporate headquarters. Meanwhile, Jim Rodriguez was still doing physical therapy. Tommy Chen was struggling to find work with one arm, and their families were drowning in medical bills. Marcus started having dreams about the explosion. He'd wake up in cold sweats, hearing Jim's screams echoing in his head. His wife Sarah would find him sitting on the back porch at 2 a.m, staring into the darkness. His kids started asking why Daddy was always so angry, so distant. The man who'd once been known as Steel felt like he was crumbling from the inside out. One night, sitting in his garage with a half-empty bottle of bourbon, Marcus made a decision. Derek Hawthorne was going to pay for what he'd done. Not just to Marcus, to Jim, to Tommy, to all the men whose lives he'd destroyed in the name of corporate profits. It was going to take time, patience, and planning, but Marcus had plenty of all three. The first step was research. Marcus spent months learning everything he could about Derek's background, his habits, his weaknesses. He discovered that Derek had lied on his resume about his previous experience. He'd never actually managed a manufacturing facility before Riverside Steel. He also found out that Derek was having an affair with his secretary, Linda Morrison, while his wife was home raising their 2 young children. But Marcus needed something bigger, something that would destroy Derek the same way Derek had destroyed so many others. He started paying attention to Derek's business practices, looking for any signs of the corner-cutting and rule-bending that seemed to define his management style.
The opportunity came 18 months after the explosion. Corporate was pushing for another round of cost cuts, and Derek was scrambling to show results. Marcus noticed that Derek had started purchasing cheaper, off-brand replacement parts for critical machinery, parts that didn't meet the same safety specifications as the original components. He was also falsifying maintenance records, marking equipment as serviced when it hadn't been touched in months. Marcus began documenting everything. He started carrying a small camera to work, taking pictures of the substandard parts, the doctored maintenance logs, the safety equipment that hadn't been replaced despite being expired. He made copies of memos where Derek explicitly told supervisors to ignore certain safety protocols to save time and money. The final piece of the puzzle came when Marcus overheard Derek bragging to another manager about how he'd been skimming money from the workers' safety fund to boost his quarterly numbers. Derek had been taking money that was supposed to go toward protective equipment and safety training and redirecting it to make his cost-cutting measures look more impressive to corporate. Marcus spent 3 months building an ironclad case. He had photographs, documents, recorded conversations, and testimonies from other workers who'd witnessed Derek's violations. He organized everything into a comprehensive report that would be impossible for corporate to ignore or cover up. But Marcus didn't just want Derek fired, he wanted him destroyed. So instead of going to corporate first, he sent his evidence to 3 different places simultaneously: the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, the local district attorney's office, and investigative reporter Catherine Walsh at the regional newspaper who'd been following the story of industrial accidents in their area. The timing was perfect. Derek had just received another promotion and was scheduled to speak at a big corporate event about innovative cost management strategies in heavy manufacturing. The night before his speech, Catherine Walsh's story hit the front page with the headline, "Mill Manager Stole Safety Funds While Workers Suffered." The article laid out everything in devastating detail: Derek's falsified maintenance records, his use of substandard parts, his theft from the safety fund, and most damning of all, his knowledge of the safety issues that led to the explosion that nearly killed 3 men. The article included quotes from anonymous workers describing the culture of fear Derek had created, and expert testimony about how his actions had directly endangered lives. By morning, Derek's world was collapsing. OSHA announced a full investigation into Riverside Steel's safety practices. The district attorney opened a criminal case for embezzlement and reckless endangerment. Corporate immediately suspended Derek pending their own internal investigation, and his wife filed for divorce after learning about his affair from reporters who showed up at their house looking for comment. But Marcus wasn't finished. He'd learned that Derek had been planning to buy a boat with the money he'd stolen from the safety fund. Instead of confronting Derek directly, Marcus sent an anonymous tip to the IRS about Derek's unreported income from his embezzlement scheme. He also sent copies of Derek's falsified inspection reports to the insurance company that covered the mill, knowing they'd investigate any potential fraud that might have contributed to the explosion. The dominoes kept falling. The IRS audit revealed that Derek owed over $100,000 in back taxes and penalties. The insurance company sued him for fraud and demanded repayment of all claims related to the explosion. Corporate fired him and filed their own lawsuit to recover the stolen safety funds. The state attorney general opened an investigation into his business practices at his previous jobs, leading to additional charges. Derek went from making 6 figures and driving a BMW to facing multiple felony charges and bankruptcy. His reputation in the industry was destroyed. No manufacturing company would ever hire him again. He had to sell his house, his car, everything he owned just to pay legal fees.
The final blow came during Derek's criminal trial 6 months later. Marcus testified as the key witness, finally getting his chance to tell the whole story under oath. He described in detail how he'd warned Derek about the safety issues, how Derek had threatened him to keep quiet, and how Derek's greed had led directly to the explosion that injured his coworkers. "Mr. Thompson," Derek's lawyer asked during cross-examination, "isn't it true that you held a personal grudge against my client and spent over a year planning this elaborate scheme to destroy his career?" Marcus looked directly at Derek, who was sitting at the defendant's table looking pale and defeated. "No, sir. I spent over a year making sure that justice was served for Jim Rodriguez, Tommy Chen, and every other worker whose safety Mr. Hawthorne put at risk for his own profit. This wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability." Derek was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for embezzlement and reckless endangerment. The judge specifically noted that his actions had shown a callous disregard for human life in pursuit of personal gain. After the trial, corporate implemented a complete overhaul of safety procedures at Riverside Steel. They established a worker safety committee with real authority to shut down operations when necessary. They brought in new management that prioritized worker welfare over quarterly profits. Jim Rodriguez was hired as the new safety coordinator, and Tommy Chen became an advocate for disabled workers' rights.
Marcus was promoted to shift supervisor, a position he'd deserved for years. More importantly, he finally felt like he could sleep at night. The nightmares about the explosion didn't disappear completely, but they became less frequent. His relationship with Sarah and his kids slowly healed as the anger and guilt that had been eating him alive finally began to fade. On the 3rd anniversary of the explosion, Marcus stood in front of Furnace 3, which had been completely rebuilt with the highest safety standards. A small memorial plaque honored the workers who'd been injured with a simple inscription, "In memory of those who suffered and in commitment to those who serve." Jim Rodriguez walked up beside him, his scars still visible but his spirit strong. "You know, Marcus, people around here still call you Steel, but I think it's for a different reason now." Marcus smiled, feeling something like peace for the first time in years. "Yeah? What's that?" "Because you proved that doing the right thing, even when it takes time, even when it's hard, that's what real strength looks like." As Marcus watched the new shift of workers begin their day, all wearing proper safety equipment and working with machinery that met every safety standard, he realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemy. Sometimes it's about building something better from the ashes they left behind. Derek Hawthorne had thought he could sacrifice workers' lives for corporate profits and get away with it. Instead, he learned that in a town built on steel and sweat, where 3 generations of the same families had worked side by side, justice might be slow in coming, but it was as inevitable as the sunrise over the river. The mill whistle blew, signaling the start of another shift, and Marcus Thompson walked back to work with his head held high, knowing that he'd helped ensure that what happened to Jim, Tommy, and so many others would never happen again. That was worth more than any revenge could ever be.